Welcome back, everybody. This is the Relationship Blueprint, and we're here to unlock your power of connection. And I'm so excited today to have Allison Dragony with me. We've known each other a long time now. She was one of the first people I met when I became part of the Imago community, which I don't know what year it is, and we don't care. Let me tell you a little bit more about Allison. Allison is a certified Imago professional facilitator and coach with over 13 years of experience in the Imago community. She has worked as a workshop and training coordinator at Imago, Georgia, alongside Wendy and Bob Patterson and Jessica Ames. And I want to tell you, Jessica is my next guest, which is going to be awesome. She's going to talk to us about menopause, and I'm very excited to hear about that. And that Wendy's episode, Relational Contracting, has been by far the most successful episode of all. So Allison comes from good stock. In her role as Director of Trainings, Workshops, and Practice Development at Imago, Georgia, she sets up all the professional trainings, she develops newsletters, social media, blogs, posts, and everybody, including me, wishes that they could have an Allison. Allison resides in Tucson, Arizona with her husband, Chris McLean, and her two children. You have a background in theater, writing, and clay art. You are also the co-owner, I didn't know this, of the Hidden Grill restaurant with your husband. In addition to your work with Imago, Georgia, Allison offers something pretty amazing. Allison offers workshops called Sharing the Silent Struggle, which provides a space for individuals navigating the grief, pregnancy loss. So, is there anything that I've left out about you, Allison, that you feel is important to share?
No, you got just about everything. I think I just have one correction is that I should adjust it that we're the former owners of the Hidden Grill. We did close the restaurant. So
Oh, you did. You did. And I think you,
yeah.
yeah. What year was that, Allison?
We closed it at the end of 2022. We were unfortunately one of the casualties of COVID in the food industry. So we just couldn't keep it going through all the challenges that came after the pandemic. I guess it was still kind of during the pandemic at that point, but
Yeah, 2022. So you had this restaurant and then you had to close. And I am absolutely sure you're not alone.
yeah, oh yeah, there were so many of our peers and former coworkers and stuff who had their own food businesses that had to close during that time. So, we loved it. We had such a good time doing that restaurant, and the food was really successful in our community. It was just, kind of bad timing for us, I think.
In timing, when you're saying that, it's so important because in my practice, I've met number of clients who like they came for couples work, but they had a story. And their story often revolved around like the 2008 crisis, financial crisis, and the shame attached to the loss of real estate, but everything, right? And then also the pandemic and restaurants and businesses that had to close. So really what we're talking about is grief again, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
There was a lot of that we had to work through in our relationship and still are, of that kind of having this big dream and putting so much energy into something that didn't work out and not because of hard work. No. It's like you could work
No.
if you want and sometimes these things are just not meant to be. It wasn't the right time. So
Yeah, so as a couple now, you're still working through some of those things because you really did have a dream and not because of anything in your control, that dream really changed.
yeah, it did. Yeah.
Mm. And I think that's sort of the story of marriage, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Evolving and dreaming together and working through when things don't go as we lined out, planned very specifically. You have to kind of roll with it together. So,
It reminds me of the cartoon show Up.
yes. I love that movie so much.
That clip in the very beginning when, how they have the dream, right? And then they have one dream and they have to let go of that dream. I think the car breaks down and they break into their piggy bank again to put their dream aside for now to get the car fixed. And then that happened over and over again in their marriage. And there's a really critical part of that story, isn't there? Do you use that at all in your work with couples suffering the loss of pregnancy?
I haven't, but now I would like to reuse that, yeah, revisit it. I remember that clip being just such a perfect example of this longevity of marriage and the things um that we go through and their experience of that same thing and their resilience and then how he ends with this child in his care, it's kind of an interesting, beautiful, sad journey that they show in 10 minutes. It's amazing.
In 10 minutes. And there's not a time when Kevin and I do the couples workshop, there isn't a time that both of us usually don't, we have tears because even though we've seen it a million times, we've had all those losses and joys,
Yeah,
but many of the losses. And I always say to my couples, you can get through anything connected. But boy, when you're a couple and you don't feel connected through those hard things, so lonely.
yeah, I think that's the drive that I have with Imago and using the dialogue, especially through an experience like pregnancy loss, but also the loss of a business or anytime you're grieving, is that it's so easy to kind of turn into yourself in your grief and get
Mhm.
overwhelmed and isolate and kind of stay in this place where we don't often have the words, I think, in our culture to talk about grief. But putting couples and putting even individual, other people who have experienced pregnancy loss who are not in a couple together in a dialogue to be able to have this kind of structure and comfort and um, I'm thinking about, like a nest situation, it's this little cozy kind of space for people to have where they can open up and share in an environment that is safe and connected. And because of the structure, I think you are protected from it going to these places that can feel really scary with grief. So,
And
I
you
love
make such a great point, though, Allison, about the safety and then the structure. So I think what people, my our listeners, I have planned to have a couple do a dialogue in the next couple of weeks. In fact, I was supposed to film tonight, and the couple, I think he's taking a class, so they can't do it. But I don't think our listeners really understand the dialogue unless they're my client or they're someone else's client. But really, we've done a little bit of it on the show where we really try to model the mirroring and the validation and empathy. And maybe it would help if you and I did one right now.
that sounds great.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So, do you want to share something maybe about the restaurant or anything else? And then I'll be the receiver and you be the sender.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So before we start, if you're going to try this at home, um, typically what you would do is you would do what I just did, which is ask for an appointment. Hey, I'd really like to talk with you about your restaurant. Is this a good time? And then, Allison has already agreed. And then the first thing we do after that is to make sure that we're breathing. We're calming our nervous system. We're reminding ourselves that we're safe with this person because they've agreed to have this. And I'm saying dialogue because it's not a conversation. It is a safe way to converse. It is called a dialogue. And and we kind of manage our own reactivity. If Allison didn't want to do it right now because she didn't sign up for this, she gets to say, no, I don't think so. And then after that, we would give each other appreciation. And I'd like to do that with you, Allison, is what I've appreciated about you is that you manage Imago, Georgia, with so much professionalism and joy.
Heard you say that what you appreciate about me is that I've managed Imago, Georgia with such professionalism and joy.
Yeah. Whenever I've had a question or um, anything at all, you respond quickly and really so genuinely.
And whenever you've had a question, you find that I respond quickly and genuinely to what you're asking.
Yeah. And so when I imagine when a client calls and they want to see Wendy or Bob or Jessica and they're like in despair and they schedule that with you, that they feel safe already.
You imagine that if when a client calls and they're scheduling and they might be in despair and they reach me, that they are feeling some of that warmth and connection already. And did I get
You make it safe. You make it safe. Yeah. And so yeah, that's it.
thanks, Coco?
You're welcome.
And I would like to give you an appreciation. Coco, knowing you for all these years, I remember the first time I met you at a training at Bob and Wendy's, just feeling such warmth and care and passion for your work from you.
So what you remember about me from all those years ago is my warmth and care and my passion for the work that I do.
Yes. And also your passion and warmth for your family, that you're such a dedicated um, mother and grandmother and partner. And I just admire your and Kevin's relationship as well.
So you also want to acknowledge that I also have that care and that warmth for my family and my children, my grandchildren, my husband, my family. And you really admire my relationship with Kevin. Thank you. So now I might say, is there more? And we could go deeper, but is there more is the magical question, which you'll hear in a few minutes. But we always start with that appreciation so that we remind, especially if we're going to talk about something hard, we just remind our hearts and our minds that this person is somebody we care about. And our goal is to just come to some sort of understanding at the end of it. Notice I didn't say agreement, but understanding. So the reason I asked about the restaurant as an example was because I really do care about Allison, and I'm curious about how she's managing that. So if you want to just get started, and then I'll mirror, and is that okay with you? Okay.
Well, I think one of the struggles that we've had with the restaurant is that we put so much energy into it. We planned, we put money into it, and more than that, we put our just souls and energy into this business and trying to make it successful.
So one of the things you're still struggling with is how much time and money and energy that you put into this. And, you did so much to make it successful. Did I miss anything? Is
And
there more?
there is more, yeah. I think, especially with my husband, he's so talented. He was really doing everything himself. It was his concept. He was cooking all the food from scratch. Just putting in so much work, working 80 hours a week on this business, and did a wonderful job. Executed it at such a level that the food was delicious, the meals were coming out on time, people were satisfied with what was happening. Um, but we just couldn't ever get it over that level to, make it sustainable. And I should say great staff as well,
Oh, well, so your husband, you're really kind of really pointing to him that what you know that it's specifically for him, that this was his concept and that he put in 80 hours a week and had such great food and you had great feedback about the food and, you know, you did well. People were really satisfied, but you just couldn't like kind of get over that or that thing during that time. Is there more?
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And our staff, I think, it was really we had a young staff of people that were, wonderful. And it's always hard when something doesn't work out and you have to let people go. That also, they're all wonderful. They, of course, were very, talented, brilliant people. So they've got on to great jobs after that. But that transition too was really hard with the restaurant.
So, yeah, so the acknowledgement of this amazing staff that you had and that difficulty, like having to let them go. And that although they're really great and talented and they've gone on to other things, that was also part of the letting go.
Absolutely.
Is there more?
Um, I guess just for I know a lot of people went through this, and one of the things that was really helpful for us after losing the restaurant was to just kind of hibernate for a little bit. We had this like 6-month period of transition and kind of reconnecting with each other because there had been a lot of strain when you're in a business together.
Yeah.
Done that with their partner.
Been there, done that one.
Yeah.
No,
Woo! So it can be a lot of energy that was poured into this other thing. And so finding each other again without that thing, without that business is
yeah.
an important journey for us. That kind of it's still going, but that 6 months after I remember being very intense on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you really took 6 months to hibernate and you called it a transition and that you had to decide really kind of go in together to kind of reconnect and really process what you both had gone through, but also this reconnection because you were both so in it and that owning a business together is stressful. It adds a whole nother, layer to your relationship. And so then who are we without the restaurant? Did I get that?
Got it. You got it exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Is
Yeah.
there more?
No, I think
So it makes total sense to me that you would really need that time after this dream dies, that you and your husband had to hibernate and figure it out, like together. How do we transition and who are we without the restaurant? And how do we begin again? It makes total sense. You would want to just hibernate.
yeah.
And I imagine now you might be feeling less sad, but still sad.
Absolutely.
Are there any other feelings?
Um, Also proud. I feel very proud. And I'm so proud of my husband. Like I just hold so much care and pride for what he was able to accomplish during that.
So yeah, a little bit sad, but really a lot of pride, proud of both of you that what you've overcome, but also really proud of your husband and what he was able to accomplish. Mm. So thank you, Allison, for letting our listeners just see, you know, how a dialogue can be so safe and that structure. If you notice, listeners, that I didn't start talking about my business. I didn't start, although I wanted to, because my husband and I have owned a business and I wanted to connect with Allison and say, I get it, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. But in the dialogue, I'm the receiver and I am the container for Allison. I'm not making it about me. And it forced me to really receive her. And although I had ways I wanted to connect, I wasn't thinking about the next thing that I wanted to say, which stopped me from truly listening. So there's more about that. in other episodes. But I thank you for doing that so that great. I think that when you're talking about your lovely, powerful group you run, when you were talking about the structure, I wanted them to see and hear why the structure talking about something so intimate and with people that you're not really intimate with is so important. So your journey to Imago, I find it fascinating. And I was learning more about your history. I was like, wow. So Allison, I thought Allison scheduled and did blogs, and I had no idea really how deeply you've become, an Imago facilitator. You're just part of us. And can you tell us about how you found Imago and how it's impacted your life?
Absolutely. So I was nannying at the time and dog sitting, and I had one of my nannying clients introduced me, saw a job posting with Bob and Wendy, and so I applied and got the job, and immediately just felt like, oh wow, okay, this place is cool. This is really interesting, and I'd always really been interested in therapy and psychology, and so being a part of their practice was just really cool. Um,
Yeah.
I quickly became the training and workshop coordinator, and so I kind of shifted away from the office management into the trainings and workshops after a few years. But um, getting to be in the workshops with couples. And I mean, so I've been in assisting workshops for 13 years now, and we do 6 workshops a year, 4 to 6 a year, so the number of couples and individuals that I've seen come in through the workshops is just incredible. The diversity, you know, the age range that we get in a workshop, the where people are in their relationship all together doing the same thing and having their own unique experience each time. It's just incredible.
Well, I think what you're saying, so let me like just for I'm actually doing a workshop in Florida. It's mostly I developed this workshop or planned it for my therapists that are getting trained because it's their requirement that they attend a workshop, right? And so Kevin and I were talking about it, and we've decided to make this spiritual workshop, looking at Imago through the lens of spirituality and God and the space between. And so we've never done that before, but we're going to bring that to Claremont, Florida, March 28th through 30th. And very excited about it because it is part of our relationship. And because we already had 10 couples that were very interested in sort of exploring not only Imago, but the spirit through the spiritual lens, it felt like a natural thing for us to do. And so what I want the listeners to understand in these couples workshops, as Allison described, people come like sometimes they're not even married yet. They're just those eager couples that are trying to prevent a divorce, and they're lovely. And then there are people that are in a lot of trouble. And then there are people that just want to keep deepening the relationship and are really not satisfied with good enough. They want more. And then you talked about the ages. And I wondered from your lens, because you've actually done more workshops than I have. What is the most exciting thing for you as you see couples on day one and then the last day?
I think the most exciting thing is on day one, you see a lot of nervousness or kind of skepticism, I would say, a lot of
Uh-huh.
we call the couples a draggy and a dragger, and so the dragger is real excited to go. The person who signed them up is real excited, and maybe the partner is not bought into what we're doing just yet. And so that first night is really interesting to just see the energy of both of the partners and where they are. And then by Sunday, by the end of the weekend, to see them just relax and melt and just be together. And so often, if there was tension at the beginning of the weekend, that's released and they're gentle together and they've kind of found this way to reconnect, to look in each other's eyes again. I think that's one of the most powerful exercises that I remember even from my own workshop experience, but how often we don't look at our partners because we're so busy doing life or we're so, have to deal with our children or our jobs or whatever is happening that we don't take that time to even just face our partner. And so to see this connection, to see people taking in each other's faces again or touching at the end of the workshop is just, that's my favorite. I love it.
Me too. It's almost addictive, I've got to say. Like, yeah, there's just like this hope that you hold for these couples on Friday, and you know that they are nervous. There is definitely a dragging. I've never seen two people who are like, let's go. Usually there's one, right, who's like, all right, or instead, if you don't go, we're getting divorced or whatever. But I'm glad, and being able to watch people through the exercises that they get to do on their own. They don't have to share in a big group because it's not therapy, it's psychoeducation. And watching them go off on their own and having these meaningful dialogues that help them go, oh God, we've had this conversation 1,000 times, but I never heard you like that. And that Kevin and I still, will have dialogues like that, and we're not any spring chickens, and I am always so grateful and kind of surprised still and like, wow, so that's really came up inside of me and I had no idea it was there. And then the resentment sort of just melts too. You use the word melting. I think that's an excellent adjective. So you and your husband did a workshop. When did that happen in your journey?
We did the Getting the Love You Want workshop before we got married. So we had been
Mm.
together about 4 years, and I had done the keeping workshop by myself, which is the Imago individuals workshop before that. So I kind of knew what to expect, and Chris had no idea other than what I had shared at home, but it was so wonderful for him, I think, because he is a man of few words. He doesn't assert himself with words a lot. And so to have this structure where and it was good for me too, because I had to be quiet, I had to not talk and to listen. And I think it was just it was transformative for our relationship and our communication to be able to have this space where it taught both of us, that me to quiet down and him to offer up more. It was just wonderful, and I'm so glad we did it before we got married. That was, a really good decision on our.
What a great way to start out. I don't think I've ever met anybody. In fact, I had this really lovely couple. They're in their 70s. And he said at one point, I wonder if in my first marriage, if I had had this, if I could have kept my family together. And it wasn't disrespectful to his second wife. It was just sort of a real awareness of, and he's a pretty famous surgeon. Uh, you know, has nothing to do with how bright you are, but really like the skills we didn't learn. How do we talk about hard things without hurting our partner? How do we do that? So yeah, there's a great gift in communication, and then once you know it, you can't unknow it.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yep. Sure. Yeah.
And I'm thinking then, so you and Chris did this, and then of course you've really launched into something really big where you live. Do you want to tell us about that journey, this beautiful group that you run? You share a little bit about how you got there.
Yes, I will. So I became an Imago facilitator. I was the admin on the training that Bob and Wendy did. They were, kind of launching that program in the US, I don't know, 2017 or 2016, something like that. And so I had done the training with them, and then I was the admin on the online training when we all went to COVID. So I was helping transfer that all to Zoom. We're doing an international training suddenly on Zoom for the first time. As everyone knows, that was a very exciting time to launch things. And so I got certified as a facilitator in 2020 during the pandemic. And it was, uh, I'm so proud of that accomplishment. And it's something that I've wanted to, bring into the world as a coach, but I've been kind of scared. I was scared to really put myself out there in that way because I'm more comfortable behind the scenes, I think.
Mm.
This is a passion project that was born out of actually having our own journey with pregnancy loss. So when right out, I've had 4 miscarriages in our, fertility journey. And so after we lost the business, we actually also had a pregnancy loss during that kind of hibernation period that I was talking about. Um, and coming out of, um, I was trying to really reset again with career and wanting to try to help people with this feeling that I was having. I needed something to put my energy into. And so I decided that I wanted my focus for the as a facilitator to be pregnancy loss and supporting people that are going through what we've been through. So that's kind of how it started.
So, like a lot of things in life, right, that it was born out of need. You know, you also had, you said you're so proud you've become a facilitator. I wanted to ask if you could differentiate for our listeners. I'm an Imago therapist. Allison is an Imago facilitator. They may think, well, what is the difference? So would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the facilitator program is a coaching program, essentially, or consulting program. So we're not therapists. We don't do any sort of regressive work with clients. It's coaching and facilitating the dialogue or communication between people. So a lot of facilitators work in the corporate world. They're small business owners, teachers, lawyers, moderators. It's really any career doctors. We have a lot of physicians in the program. So it's really anyone who wants to bring a connected communication to their community or their workspace. Um, and it's such an in-depth, wonderful coaching program. I'm constantly amazed at the brilliant people that come in and help us make it better and more rich and more diverse. It's really an exciting program. So yeah, I'm very proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, so really, I mean, it is so because my husband's a facilitator. Allison knows that. But I am a little envious sometimes because it's like the people that are in your classes, they're learning how to do this and then they take it into their world and touch so many lives, right? I mean, as a facilitator, you're not limited to what happens in a therapy room. And and I think that's really exciting. I think it's really exciting. And I also think that it's world changing. Like we start obviously the couplehood that you and Chris have done your work. And then I want to hear how it works as an Imago family with your boys. But that's your core. But then now you're helping people that have had this loss, this big loss when you lose a baby. And having had my own miscarriage, I I felt back then like it didn't really count. That's helped the impression. I mean, even direct messages from people that I received, like, oh, at least you were, you know, past 3 months, or at least this, or you better be grateful that. And it really felt so invalidating. And so there at that time, I just tucked those feelings away. And so I'm really touched by the work you're doing with couples that are suffering from this, and there's so many couples, yeah, that either can't even conceive or and they go through the IVF. And so tell us more about that journey.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Your experience with it as well. I know it's so hard, and that I just wanted to touch on that invalidation that you said. I think there's so um, I think that it contributes so much to people not speaking about it because we don't really have this space to honor early pregnancy loss, where there's kind of a competition feel between when you lost a pregnancy or, it's such a strange dynamic for people, and it becomes very isolating because you don't know who you can talk to or who is safe to tell about this. I also had people say that, well, you have two kids, so why are you sad? Or it was like, well, because I'm sad. It was a really hard experience, and so that's something that I wanted to make space for too. Is that to just normalize that. I mean, wherever you are in this journey, if you haven't been able to conceive, that in itself is a loss, and to have this, if you've had a pregnancy loss at any stage, of course, it's very difficult. At any stage, there are different circumstances that happen when it's later. It's, certainly different for everyone, but it's hard at any time. And so I um I started the concepting for this kind of out of what was happening in my life when I had the loss, and I had started doing pottery when I had
Mm.
this loss. And I've always been an artist. I have a BFA in acting, a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting. I've always been a writer, so I've had this theater, acting, writing thing going all the time, but I hadn't found kind of a physical medium that I really liked. And I started doing play, and I started a project right after it was like the week that I had the pregnancy loss in 2023, the beginning of 2023. I started a project, and it took me about 7 weeks to finish it. And that time I spent very focused on making this little gargoyle, and it had wings, little angel wings. And it was so therapeutic for me to be able to channel that energy into something physical, into just this like physical movement of touching the clay and shaping it and thinking about it and still feeling this very physical pain and emotional, but to have something external to focus on was just phenomenal for me. So that's kind of where it started. Um, and how I worked in or progressed with the workshop is having, I had started it as kind of 3 hour workshop all in one day. And then I realized after taking some workshops myself that that's a really kind of too long to talk and sit in this space. Um, so I've decided to make it shorter. So the next one that we're going to do is a 4 week program. And so we meet for an hour and a half each week. And then we start with kind of connection exercises, talking, sharing if you want. But the way that I have structured it is that if you don't want to talk about the pregnancy loss, you don't have to. You don't have to share anything you don't want to. You'll be able to learn the skills that we're teaching without having to share more than you want. And then the end of the class, I'm doing art. So that's the really excited to get. So we'll have some writing exercises, some movement, and some sculpture. If you don't have clay, we're going to use, you can use paper or whatever you have. But to just get that experience of that physical expression of what's happening inside.
So can I ask you a question? Would that be okay? So when is your next class starting? When can people is it on Zoom? How can people sign up?
So it'll be on Zoom. It's going to be in April. I don't have the specific date yet, but it'll be on the Imago, Georgia website. I'll list it on there. And then I also have a website that's nestingdragon.com. So it'll be
Okay, so nestingdragon.com or Imago, Georgia. And if you want to, you can send it to me again and I can add it to the notes in this episode so that people who they might listen to it in a month from now. I mean, it's interesting as I watch my stats, that, uh, it's just funny how Wendy might have been episode 3, but people are listening to her every week.
My gosh.
Yeah. Uh, that's Wendy, right? Uh, that's Wendy. But yeah, so if I can go in and edit that so that the people that are listening right now, and then even if that class is over, I'm sure you'll be offering it again.
Yeah, I'd like to offer several times throughout the year. I'm excited to see how this structure works with the 4 weeks rather than kind of all at once. I think it'll be easier for us to integrate the exercises, and I want people to have the space between each session to be able to kind of start to, you know, release and feel what's coming up as we go through.
Yeah. Do you sign up as a couple or as an individual?
I have it set up as an individual for this one, so I think I will probably do some with couples in the future, but right now it is signing up as an.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do that. I think that would be really powerful. I know that, so I think you know that our daughter lost a child. She was 88 days old and she went to a support group locally. And, you know, I wasn't part of the support group. Of course, I wanted to go. It was the only support group. So we were not going to take up space when she needed it so much. But I mean, as far as it goes, we could have used support as well. And I'm thinking about how big these losses are and how there's so many people all over the world that are grieving and don't know what to do with their grief. They just don't know where do I put it? Who do I talk to about it? And then that competition that you just highlighted for us is a big deal. Like I remember people saying to Katie, well, she lost her child at 6 years old. So at least, you didn't really have him that long. Just people trying, honestly, I think to make people feel better. I think the things that people say are generally never meant to be mean, but it's that whole intention impact story. My intention might be to relieve my own nerves. Somebody's had a loss, and then I say, oh, at least he's with God now. Well, they don't really want to hear that. They don't want him to be with God. They want him to be right there in the room holding him. So my intentions can be good, but it's very typically people say it's extremely invalidating and very painful to have those comments made. What helped you the most? What is something for those of us listening that really don't know what to say when someone has suffered such a loss? What have you found comforting that people did or said for you?
Oh, that's such a good question, Coco. Thank you. I think one thing is just offering to listen. Just offering, yeah, just offering a space to listen and not saying anything. They didn't have
Yeah.
to say anything, but or offering space for me to just cry, and just release. Um, Several friends do that for me or check in on me. Um, I had some people send me, gift baskets that were at first. I think it's really hard to have any physical thing that's kind of associated with it when you're first grieving. And so I remember receiving this. It's a special little pillow. It's a little heart pillow. I did. I held it. I held it so tight and cried all as I was going through this. And then um, I ended up having so sorry, this is taking me to different places here, but at this pillow, I had a loss in early 2023, and then I had another one in late 2023. And so the second loss took a really long time, which is another thing that I think I want this group for. What I think is great about this group is there's so much around miscarriage that we don't know around pregnancy loss and about how many different things can happen, the different nuances of it, and what to do when you notice that it's starting to happen to you. Like that was something that I really didn't know what to do. Looking for those answers, there was a lot I didn't know before I went through it. And so my second loss, I remember just holding that pillow. But between losses, I couldn't really look at the pillow, you know? So because it's just really interesting what is comforting to you and what isn't at different times of the journey. So now I see the pillow, I love it. I still hug it. I associate it with people caring about me and a memory of um, the little spirit babies, you know. And so it's it's now something that is very comforting for me to look at. But there were times during this journey that I couldn't look at it. So I think what is comforting to people is very individual. I mean, it's really specific to your experience of what's happening. And I think the biggest thing that people can do for someone that's going through it is just say, I'm here for you. Do you need or even just say if you want to share when you want to share, I'm here and offer that
Yeah.
and space and listen.
So offering the space, offering time, offering to your presence really in this situation is enough. Nobody wants you can't fix it for the person. As much as you may want to, you cannot fix it for the person. And I think for couples, it's I know that when Kevin and I experienced this loss, we were never more disconnected in our entire 25 years of marriage. I was angry, oh, angry, angry, angry. And he was feeling just so protective of Katie. And so we were really in two different worlds. And it was a lonely time in our marriage. It was very lonely. And I look back on all the five people living in our house grieving very differently and how that energy was so uh, tangible. Like you could feel it in the house. And I am grateful that we have all. Katie has a baby. Did you know that Katie has a baby? Yeah, he's 9 months. He's 6 months old, and his name is Callan, and he's wonderful and he's healthy. And that's been also a really healing part of our story, but it doesn't replace Boyd. So there's so many like complexities of this, as you're saying. Like there's not one answer for a couple or for an individual. So having the structure and the safe place to explore it is so powerful, really.
I think it's just necessary. I think there's such a void here for people to be able to find support for their grief and this loss. Um, and so I'm hoping that I'm just I hope it helps people. You know, I hope it just provides a little bit of that comfort space.
I think I'm absolutely sure it does. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say thank you for sharing your story too, Coco, and the what you said about um, just the difference and the tangible grief and that distance that can happen between you. I think we definitely experience that as well, and that's something that I've kind of worked through doing this work, tried to like really intellectualize and figure out what you can. It's just this journey that you're going through. It's everybody's personal timing with grief. Some people, are able to move on faster than others are, and whatever your time frame is your time frame. There's really no rushing. There are things that you can do to seek comfort. There are things that you can do to share. There is information that you can get and there's support, but your timeline with grief is very individual, which um I've had even with each pregnancy loss, I've had different experiences with the time that it took to recover, and so that's something I just want everyone to know, that however long it's taking you, whatever your experience of that grief is, it's okay. It's you. And if it's starting to get in the way of your life and you're not able to work, or, it really is impacting your relationship, that is the time to get help and to find a therapist and a support group and friends, whoever you can talk to and connect with about it. So,
And I think it is important to get professional help only because all of the people you may normally talk to about a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily need a therapist are part of the death story. And so they're so in it, either trying to help you or make things better or deal with their own grief, that they're not able to be there for you because you're not experiencing the same, you're experiencing the same loss, but not in the same way. And I think I think that you're also bringing up something that's somewhat, let's just say, a hot spot in our political situation right now is what happens now with miscarriages feel very personal, very tender, and maybe legal. So we have friends whose daughter-in-law was having a miscarriage in South Carolina, and because she wasn't dying, they weren't able to do anything about her loss. And until she developed, what is that thing when your body is poisoning itself? I can't remember. What is that? Sepsis. Until she was in sepsis, were they able to? But they were about to transport her across state lines because if she waited too long, she wouldn't have made it. And, there's so much confusion around this issue, especially all these couples that really want a baby. So they're already grieving, and now they have to figure out how to save the woman's life.
yes.
Yeah. So that's another whole area that I feel like we need to really address and provide space for.
And to know that what the signs are of when you're starting to get an infection. That was actually my second support loss, but um, I had the tissue was retained, and so that's why it took so long. So the pregnancy ended around 9 weeks, but the tissue was retained, and so I didn't actually have the full miscarriage for several weeks after that, which is something that I think a lot of people don't understand, that it doesn't always happen quickly. And so there are health complications that can happen very quickly once you get an infection because of the nature of vessels and things in your uterus. And so, for people to understand what the symptoms are of going into sepsis and when you really, really need to get into the hospital, and for us to have access for healthcare for women, that they're not having to be grieving a loss and at the same time fighting for their life. Like, this is basic healthcare. And
Just absolutely healthcare. Such an important distinction to make, that this is really about healthcare. And I think until, like, some people that may have different opinions, until it really happens, maybe your own wife or your own child or your sister, this particular story, she's okay. She lived, and she didn't have to get transported, but it was touch and go. And so we all need to think beyond what our own opinions are about things, and move beyond what our judgments are, and think about, this is a basic right, the basic right to health care and a woman's life. And I'm so sorry that you went through all that. So I'm imagining all that you've been through in during COVID since 2020, with the loss of your restaurant, loss of you've had 4 miscarriages.
yeah, they've been spread out. So it was between my after my first son, I had one, and then after my second son, I had one. So um, I they're 4 years apart, because of how long it took us to conceive again. And then, we had another loss after him. And something that I didn't know also about getting tested for recurrent miscarriages is that one of my miscarriages was very early. So we had been trying, and it was, it was a chemical pregnancy. So I'd gotten a pregnancy test, and it was positive and then very, but light. And then the next one was negative. So I didn't say anything about that because I was like, oh, well, that probably doesn't count, or I didn't know. I didn't know what they needed to know. And then when I had the next miscarriage, I went to my doctor afterwards and she asked, and I said, well, I had this one, chemical pregnancy. And she said, oh, well, if you have two in a row, that counts as a recurrent miscarriage. And then they do different testing for you. So I had had
Okay.
before, but then I had had a pregnancy that went to term. And so having that next one didn't count as recurrent, but having that chemical pregnancy and then having another miscarriage counted as recurrent miscarriage. And I was able to get a full panel of, my hormones. They did an ultrasound. We did a special ultrasound to see that my uterine tissue was healthy and, looking for anything that could be contributing to the miscarriages.
So
And
I have a question though. So what is a chemical pregnancy? I've never heard that term.
so it's just when the pregnancy ends very early. So you have enough HCG, it's progressed far enough that your HCG levels will produce a positive pregnancy test on the urine with a urine sample. Um, blood tests are a lot more sensitive, so they can test lower levels of HCG. But if you're using a standard pregnancy test, it's a urine test. So that just means that you had a pregnancy that registered, it might have implanted, and you got the HCG going, and then it ended before it was able to get a second positive pregnancy. So,
So Allison, are you saying though this feels like if you hadn't known that this was a recurrent uh, miscarriage, then are you saying that because they knew that you were able to get further testing through your insurance that you wouldn't have normally been able to get because they wouldn't have seen it as the pattern or whatever criteria the insurance companies need to warrant further testing?
I'm not sure if it had to do with insurance. Probably, I would assume it does, but they just hadn't offered me any further testing before.
Ah,
So when I mentioned it to my doctor, she said, "Oh, well, that's different, and we should go ahead and do this panel if you're wanting to try again for a baby."
mhm.
Uh, and so that's just something I didn't know, and I don't think a lot of people know to mention is that if you do have that early test where you're getting a very slight positive, that does count. That is a pregnancy loss, and that is something that if you're wanting to try again and you're wanting to conceive, that can be really important information for them to be able to help you. Because of course, there's medications that you can take that can help you ovulate. It doesn't have to be IVF. There's a lot of different assistance that can happen if they know what's happening in your body ahead of time. Um, of course, sometimes there's nothing you can do, and it's just something that's happening. And I never want anyone to think that it's their fault or
Your
that,
fault. Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh, that's something we haven't even talked about, is it?
yeah. So it's just something that's happening in your body. There are certain things that are happening in your body that can be medically assisted, I will say.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, that is such an important thing to share with us that not counting that would be a mistake and important for your doctor to know. And that blame, that self blame that women go through. I remember thinking, I I forget if I bombed for fleas or did something to treat bugs or something that I had been in the house, and I at that time was sure that that's what had happened. Looking for reasons. I think we look for understanding when we lose things. We want to blame someone or something, and women often blame themselves.
you want a reason. You want to know why it happened. And I remember looking at licorice. I thought it was because I ate licorice, black licorice or something, and there were so many things. I was just searching and looking and, oh, I shouldn't have painted, or I shouldn't have done this, or I shouldn't have. And yeah, you go immediately to this kind of self blame and guilt place.
Yeah.
And being able to know that that's also normal, I think
Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
about it. And I felt scared to even say the thoughts I was having about what could have possibly been my fault. So I was holding all of that in, even from Christopher, from her partner. And it's like letting that go, telling someone about that, or even if you're not comfortable saying it out loud, just writing that down in your journal so it's not in your head yelling at you anymore. It helped me so much to release that shame and guilt around.
It's such a big thing, this shame. It's here this terrible thing has happened in your life, one of the biggest losses that you'll have. Excuse me. And then suffer shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's but to know it's normal to do it does help. You're so right. Because if we can normalize, yes, our relationships are gonna struggle. Of course they're gonna struggle. Because nobody grieves the same way, even though you're grieving the same thing. Yeah. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about your experience or what you want to share with our listeners that we haven't talked about, Allison?
I I guess what's coming up is just that um actually, a couple of things. So in my research around this too, so we are a neurodivergent family, which is newly discovered in our family, um, and has been a really interesting journey of learning about how our brains work. But one thing that I was learning is that for ADHD, or sometimes autistic as well, or people with uteruses who can get pregnant, um, have an can have a really large emotional response to miscarriage. Like it can really, really disrupt your emotion. I mean, everyone does, but sometimes it may feel like we're having a bigger response, or it's really overtaking your world. And that's something that has been researched with neurodivergent people. So I certainly found that comforting to read and say, okay, well, this is something that's happening in my brain, and the way that I'm processing this might also be tied to this other thing about me. And then also that when you're oh, sorry, did you?
No, I think that a lot of our listeners really wouldn't be familiar with the term neurodivergent. But can you help explain that a little?
Yes, yes. So ADHD or autism, so kind of being on this spectrum of your brain being a little sleepy. If you're ADHD, that's what they say. It's not really attention deficit. It's like too many things happening, and your brain is a little sleepier, a little dopamine light, and so you just need a little help to. I don't know if this is a good explanation of neurodivergence, but um, as far as my knowledge goes,
Would you also add gifted to that category?
yeah, I do. Yeah, gifted people are also in that realm. Yes.
So I think it's important to highlight that, and I'm really glad you brought it up because I think it's a relatively in in our lay people world, it's a newer term, and so really just understanding. Wow, so I just think and process differently. That's how I kind of define it. Uh, and then to add the research that you've done to say, wow, so when you experience a loss like this, that your emotions may be big and that you may have more difficulty processing them. And so to also normalize that, if that's your situation, and some people may not even know they're neurodiverse. So
I had no idea until we got my son tested, and then I had started to suspect with him, and then as soon as you start doing the research, it's like, oh, that's me too. Oh, okay, I see. So it was one of the things with ADHD, in particular ADD, is that you have emotional dysregulation. You can have a lot of kind of bigger emotions around things that maybe neurotypical people would not have.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
to know that while I'm also having very real grief emotions, that the level of my brain to kind of compartmentalize or deal with all the different things that were happening at the same time is already harder for me to kind of separate work, family, kids, husband, all of those things kind of overwhelm me sometimes. Then to add this other thing on top was really a huge disruption in my life. And I found it really difficult to keep work. Of course, you need time off, but to get back into work and to get this kind of rhythm going again. Um,
Yeah. And I'm thinking with the amount of losses that you had in a very short period of time, that would be hard on anyone, but you add that layer that you're describing, and that's a lot to process. That's a lot.
it's difficult, definitely. And I think also the other thing that I wanted to say is just that to really be kind to yourself, because and remember that when you're right after a loss, you have the same drop. You have a drop of hormone. Everything has suddenly dropped out of your system. And that causes an extreme emotional reaction as well. You may feel uncontrollable sobbing. Your whole body is going through this experience. And I was remember feeling just that it would never end during that time.
Mm, mm, mm.
Intensity of the grief and the sorrow, that it would never end. And I just want to reassure you, as if you're going through it right now, if that is very recent, that it does still stay with you. You're always going to have that experience. But that intensity, that just deep, deep intensity of the grief and sorrow, it lightens because you're able to then, first of all, your hormones start to stabilize, which helps a lot. And second of all, you just kind of start to process the grief, you process the loss, and your brain and your heart start to kind of catch up with each other. And it's not always be that low, low, low place that you're.
So, Allison, I feel like what you're telling people is so important because when people don't understand depression very well, I think it's a very misunderstood disorder. And when people say, suicide is a selfish act, I mean, they've never been in the dark hole. That is just clear when people talk about suicide in that way, or people that can't get out of bed after a loss. All this is misunderstood. And I know what you're sharing is so powerful because you've been there and you thought you'd never get to the other side. And although you're still grieving, you've healed quite a bit. But you also got help and had access to people that could help you, and a partner that you had done Imago work with. And I guess that is even a more alarming thought to me, is if you hadn't had those resources, which so many people don't.
They don't. And it's that's one thing that I reached out to I the nurse line. I mean, if you don't have anyone that you can call, if you just if you have insurance and they have a nurse line, you can call that. There are even, I think, I would say, if you're feeling so low and you're feeling suicidal during that time, to call the suicide support lines. But
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely reach out for professional help. I made an appointment with my midwife when I was actually going through postpartum depression. So another cycle of this kind of hormonal thing that can happen in your body through your fertility journey. But I went to my OB and my midwife, and they were able to get me in with a therapist that day. They got me in with somebody right away. They got me help with medication. So I think that's another resource that people need to know, that if you able to get in with that your OB or your midwife can actually help you with this kind of uh, grief and relief as well. And hopefully they'll know some support groups in your area as well.
So, Allison, what I hear you saying is you can't try your way out of this. This isn't your hormones are part of your biological functioning. And when all of this is going on, in addition to your sadness, it is just like trying to kayak upstream, in the rapids. There's no one who can do it. So it's not a you thing. This is just a biological issue that anyone would need help with. So feeling the shame, going back to that, like, why should I need help? Like, people might even say, well, I have a home, I have 2 children, I have a good husband, like I shouldn't feel this way. That is not the message you want to send to yourself. That comparative suffering is a losing game. And what you did was so smart to get your OBGYN and get your midwife in to help you.
It was something I didn't know. I had actually gone to, that's why I want to share it, is because I didn't know that was an option. I had gone to like a primary care doctor, who told me, he said, well, you had a baby. That was his response to me saying I was uncontrollably crying and things like that. And so I reached out to a cousin of mine, who's a nurse, and she said, call your OB, call your midwife, and they will help you. And that was my lifeline. Like, I had no idea. That's the thing when you're in this, when you're in that depression, you're in that hormonal depression, especially, that you don't know what steps to take. You're barely taking care of yourself and your child or your body that's recovering. And so one thing that was helpful too was I was able to lean on my husband and ask him for help with things that I was not able to do. But if you don't have that support system to know that that there are resources with that particular medical branch at your doctor's office, they will help you. They know what to.
It's really critical. And not everyone, either maybe you don't even have a partner and you're going through this, or you have a partner that doesn't understand, or a partner that loves you to death, but is trying to fix it. And it's a mystery to men, I think. It's not something that they know about. We don't know about enough about it, right? So expecting men to sort of get this whole thing feels pretty unfair.
It's a very different, that's one thing I talk about too, is like, the difference in the experience of carrying the pregnancy that's lost and being the partner, the support person of a person that has lost the pregnancy. And that support person can be your romantic partner or parents, or the grandparents, whoever it is that's in your life. But the experience of carrying the pregnancy and that loss and the physical toll and the hormones is, a different experience from someone who is watching the person they love go through this experience. And so, the workshop space is actually open for anyone. It's open to anyone who's had this experience. It doesn't have to be the person who carried the pregnancy, because there's so much grief. And, this applies to surrogates and people who are having surrogate pregnancies as well that may have been lost. Like, all of this encompasses loss. And so, I do just want people to know that, however you have experienced this loss, that your feelings are valid, your grief is valid, and that everyone is going to be processing this differently. So that's where we're trying to help have this structure and this kind of skill building around having these really, really difficult conversations, and mostly just holding space, just holding space for people to share and feel connected around a really awful experience that they had to through it.
Holding space is such an underestimated gift.
Yes.
I'm thinking of when we went through our loss, and I had another colleague who referred a man to me who had lost his pregnant wife, and of course the baby, in a car accident. And I said to my friend, I can't help anybody right now. Look at me. I, I can't take that on. And she said, that's why I'm asking you to do it. I think you're the right person. So I did what I normally do. I started reading all these books. I get overachiever head in my headspace, and nothing really stuck with me. But I read this one book, and I didn't love the title, but it was called Getting Grief Right. And it was written by this psychologist who was a grief specialist, as I remember it. I might remember some of this incorrectly. This is how I remember it. And he was talking about how when he was in his 30s and his wife died, she had got a disease and died in her 30s. And he like threw away everything. He Kubler-Ross, like none of it. He said none of it applied. Everything that I had told my clients to do, all this bullshit, basically, I knew was bullshit. And so I started to really think about grief differently. And at the very end, he said, I think that we think we have to get rid of our grief. I think that we think we have a year or we have this whatever timeline has been made up in our culture. But at the end of the day, for him, it was that grief is commensurate with the depth of love that you have for that being. And it hit me like, oh my gosh, that's it. And it's not about like removing it like it's something surgically that we can take away. It's about feeling it and processing it, as you're saying, and then learning how to integrate it, and that it becomes a part of us because we've loved, right? It's the love. Even though we haven't maybe met the being, we've loved. And I think that was so powerful for me to really conceptualize grief in a new way that's made a ton of sense. And I wanted to share that with you.
That concept of grief, I think, is so beautiful and so helpful because it encompasses all of those losses, I mean, and I think it does apply very much to if you've had a pregnancy loss or loss of a child. It's this deep, deep, deep love that you can't get rid of. You've had it, and it is a part of you. And you think of it that way, you don't want to get rid of it. You want to act
Exactly.
in a way that you can carry it and make yourself, I want to say more whole, but that is what it feels like, is that you've expanded yourself with this love, and it just kind of all, makes you more full to have these experiences, as awful as they are when you're in them. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think that word expansion is the good word to describe it, that your heart is big enough to hold them, even though they're gone, and that you don't have this job to get rid of it or get over it or get through it, or it sounds like a lot of verbs. A lot of verbs. Something you got to do, which is not really doesn't tell the grief story. Allison, I've loved being with you today and having this conversation. It's so rich.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
And I really am grateful you were here, and what you're sharing with others is so powerful and so important, your work.
Thank you very much, Coco. You too. Oh my gosh. I'm so grateful to have you in this community and all that you're sharing with all of us. It's wonderful.
Well, I hope that our listeners will download, like, share, whatever those technology terms are, because we're trying to get our listeners for people that need this particular episode, let's share it with others so that we can get information out and more people can suffer less. And I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank our listeners, and we'll welcome you back the next time on the Relationship Blueprint. Unlock your power of connection.